chapters 18 through 21 of the Gospel according to John, from the American Bible Union's New Testament. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Mark Penfold. Chapters 18 through 21 of the Gospel according to John. Chapter 18. Having spoken these words, Jesus went out with his disciples beyond the brook Kedron, where was a garden into which he entered, and his disciples. And Judas also, his betrayer, knew the place, because Jesus ofttimes resorted thither with his disciples. Judas therefore, having received the band and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, comes thither with torches and lamps and weapons. Jesus therefore, knowing all the things that were coming upon him, went forth and said to them, Whom do ye seek? They answered him, Jesus the Nazarene. Jesus says to them, I am he. And Judas also, his betrayer, was standing with them. When therefore he said to them, I am he, they went backward and fell to the ground. Again therefore he asked them, Whom do ye seek? And they said, Jesus the Nazarene. Jesus answered, I told you that I am he. If therefore ye seek me, let these go their way, that the saying might be fulfilled which he spoke, Of those whom thou hast given me, I lost none. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it, and smote the servant of the high priest, and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Jesus therefore said to Peter, Put up thy sword into the sheath. The cup which my Father has given me, shall I not drink it? So the band and the captain and the officers of the Jews took Jesus and bound him, and led him away to Annas first, for he was father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. And it was Caiaphas who counseled the Jews, that it is expedient that one man should die for the people. And Simon Peter and the other disciple followed Jesus. That disciple was known to the high priest, and went in with Jesus into the court of the high priest. But Peter was standing at the door without. Therefore the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to her that kept the door, and brought in Peter. Then the damsel that kept the door says to Peter, Art not thou also one of this man's disciples? He says, I am not. And the servants and the officers were standing there, having made a fire of coals, because it was cold, and were warming themselves. And Peter was standing with them, and warming himself. The high priest therefore asked Jesus concerning his disciples, and concerning his teaching. Jesus answered him, I have spoken openly to the world. I ever taught in the synagogue and in the temple, where all the Jews assemble, and I spoke nothing in secret. Why askest thou me? Ask those who have heard what I spoke to them. Behold, these know what things I said. And when he had said this, one of the officers who was standing by gave Jesus a blow on the face, saying, Answerest thou the high priest so? Jesus answered him, If I spoke evil, bear witness of the evil. But if well, why dost thou smite me? Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas the high priest. And Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. They said therefore to him, Art thou also one of his disciples? He denied, and said, I am not. One of the servants of the high priest, being a kinsman of him whose ear Peter cut off, says, Did I not see thee in the garden with him? Again therefore Peter denied, and immediately a cock crowed. Then they led Jesus from Caiaphas into the governor's palace, and it was early. And they themselves went not into the palace, that they might not be defiled, but might eat the Passover. Pilate therefore went out to them, and said, What accusation do ye bring against this man? They answered and said to him, If this man were not a malefactor, we would not have delivered him up to thee. Pilate therefore said to them, Do ye take him, and judge him according to your law. The Jews therefore said to him, It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death, that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spoke, signifying by what manner of death he should die. Pilate therefore entered into the palace again, and called Jesus, and said to him, Art thou the King of the Jews? Jesus answered, Dost thou say this of thyself, or did others tell thee concerning me? Pilate answered, Am I a Jew? Thine own nation and the chief priests delivered thee up to me. What didst thou? Jesus answered, My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight that I might not be delivered up to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence. Pilate therefore said to him, Art thou a king then? Jesus answered, Thou sayest it, because I am a king. To this end have I been born, and to this end have I come into the world, that I may bear witness to the truth. Every one that is of the truth hears my voice. Pilate says to him, What is truth? And having said this, he went out again to the Jews, and says to them, I find no fault in him, but ye have a custom that I should release to you one at the Passover. Do ye desire therefore that I release to you the King of the Jews? They all therefore cried out again, saying, Not this one, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber. Chapter 19. Then therefore Pilate took Jesus and scourged him. And the soldiers platted a crown of thorns, and put it on his head, and put on him a purple robe. And they came to him and said, Hail, King of the Jews! And they gave him blows on the face. Pilate went forth again, and says to them, Behold, I bring him forth to you, that ye may know that I find no fault in him. Jesus therefore came forth, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And he says to them, Behold, the man! When therefore the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, saying, Crucify him! Crucify him! Pilate says to them, Do ye take him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him. The Jews answered him, We have a law, and by our law he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God. When therefore Pilate heard this saying, he was the more afraid. And he went again into the palace, and says to Jesus, Whence art thou? But Jesus gave him no answer. Then says Pilate to him, Dost thou not speak to me? Knowest thou not that I have power to release thee, and have power to crucify thee? Jesus answered, Thou wouldest have no power against me, except it were given thee from above. Therefore he that delivers me to thee has the greater sin. Thenceforth Pilate sought to release him. But the Jews cried out, saying, If thou let this man go, thou art not a friend of Caesar. Whoever makes himself a king speaks against Caesar. When therefore Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus forth, and sat down on the judgment seat in a place called the Pavement, and in Hebrew, Gabbatha. And it was the preparation of the Passover, and about the 6th hour. And he says to the Jews, Behold, your king! But they cried out, Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him! Pilate says to them, Shall I crucify your king? The chief priests answered, We have no king but Caesar. Then therefore he delivered him to them, to be crucified. And they took Jesus and led him away. And bearing his cross he went forth into the place called Place of a Skull, which in Hebrew is called Golgotha, where they crucified him, and 2 others with him on either side one, and Jesus in the midst. And Pilate wrote also a title, and put it on the cross. And the writing was, Jesus the Nazarene, the King of the Jews. This title therefore many of the